Hey, and welcome into the third edition now of the Blue and Gray Show. I am Matthew Bartlett, Director and Managing Editor of the Roost, joined here with JP Heath, Rice Owl's voice, to talk some Rice football. And as always, we promise not to dwell too much on the past. We will touch on the Houston game a little bit, and then go ahead and jump ahead and preview the Texas Longhorns. And I think contractually we're supposed to mention something about why Rice plays Texas here, right? Isn't that the bit?
Yes, so audio got to turn myself on. When I was doing a radio interview in Arkansas, 92 won the ticket, I did my JFK impression. Would you like to hear that now?
Oh, do we have one?
Well, I don't know if it works with the video medium, but I can try.
Cover my eyes.
Like all y'all just close your eyes. Pretend you're not looking. Why does Rice play Texas? We don't do things because they're easy. We do them because they're hard.
Golf clap. Very good. Very good.
Little nasal congestion, so I think that threw off the northeastern part of that twang. But yes, we are check. We have contractually met those obligations. We can move on and actually talk Sark and all gas, no brakes, whatever that is.
Yeah, whatever that is. Yeah, and we will we'll touch briefly on Houston and just to say what happened, man.
It was ugly. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was not pretty. When I saw them get down, and I listened to a lot of that broadcast that night. I listened to the rest of it last night. And at the time, I thought too. Once they got down so big, and then that 17-0, you thought, okay, it's going to take a lot to get out of this. And with the struggles that had been with the running game, which we talked about coming in, that they had to reverse, it was just tough. Coach Bloomgren elaborated more yesterday, talking about the struggles of the interior of the line. Like, he's always candid. He's never going to sugarcoat or doesn't coach speak. I mean, he gives you 100% honesty, but all three phases, not much went right in that game. You did get some positives. You had a couple good drives from McCaffrey and company, but I'm glad we saw him the whole game too, to be able to build on that. And he did, not to spoil anything, but he did name him officially the starter coming up for this one too. But yeah, not much went right in that one. And it just stinks against the team it was against, and with the game coming up after it too.
Yeah, from future Big 12 member to former Big 12 member, right? Are we doing this right? I guess that was on the day after it became official that Houston was making the jump to the Big 12. We could spend hours on the realignment piece, but we're going to skip that for now because I wanted to note, I think it's interesting every time I talk with particularly members of the Rice defense. I think this is something they've done remarkably well over the past two seasons. Trayshawn Chamberlain says it the best. He says a goldfish mentality.
Yeah.
He says, just like a goldfish doesn't remember what happened 10 seconds ago, we don't remember what happened last play, and you move on to the next. And I really, we'd like to be at a point where we don't have to goldfish mentality full games, but that's kind of where we're at. You got what you got from the Houston game. It was kind of there's a lot of hard stuff. We spent 45 minutes on it on the Roost podcast. If you want to go relive the Houston game, so we're not going to do that here. But shameless plug, if you're up for it, put on your seatbelt and you can walk through all the details. But goldfish, and we're going forward and looking at Texas. And the first thing that we got to mention when we talk about Texas, other than the JFK speech, is the interesting scheduling quirk where Texas and Rice both played Arkansas within the first 2 weeks of the season and then played each other. And I don't think it's not wearing, too much homerism in blue to say Rice played Arkansas better than Texas played Arkansas. And I don't think it was particularly close.
No, not at all. You're on it, and Coach talked about it yesterday. And when I had him on our radio show with Coach Bloomgren Monday night, that was one of the things I talked about. And he said, yeah, you can get a lot of things from it, but you don't want to get too wrapped up into that and make that your only focus and notice some things that Arkansas might do. Coach mentioned the ability for Arkansas to run the ball, like for those that watch the replay of that one, because that game overlapped a lot with ours. It's got to mean something. If it was like Rice played Arkansas in week 1 like we did, and then we didn't play Texas until week 9, and there was a lot more space, but I mean, you're dealing with a lot of the same personnel, but like we were joking about in our pre-show meeting, in the end, that doesn't mean too much. Like, you never know 1 week. That's why they play the games. You never know 1 week to the next what that could mean. I hope it means what I think it could mean, like the Arkansas game. Like, it could be a really close game in the fourth quarter, but as you know, it's not a guarantee whatsoever. I think they have the tools to make it a really close game if they improve on what they did and they make those week 2 to week 3 adjustments that we didn't see from week 1 to week 2. But Texas is a different animal. I think everybody knows that, but Rice is up for the challenge here.
Yeah, and just to kind of underscore that point when we talk, setting the stage, I think back to the North Texas game last year where Rice was, coming out of a win over Southern Miss, and the Middle Tennessee game was crazy, and you're like, man, this team could be 2-0. North Texas is manageable. You could go to 3-0. Kind of the same feelings that we had going into the Houston game, and then just the offensive line got their break speed off and just all went down quickly. And then lo and behold, they bounced back the very next game and they blanked Marshall on the road with their backup quarterback, backup running back, and backup wide receivers. And
you never know. You never know when something like that happens. And we've had that recent muscle memory, so to speak, of that happening, that you can't assume that anything that happened in the Houston game would lend credence to what's going to happen in front of 90 some odd thousand. I guess they have the new end zone project, nearly 6 figures that are coming up Saturday night in our state's capital. So you never know, and that's the most beautiful thing about this wonderful avenue of sports that we have chosen to pay attention to here.
Yeah, us crazies. But I think it underscores because, we've seen Rice go out and execute pretty well, but just the other team was better. Like, that's happened over the past couple years. But going back, like the Houston game was just kind of throw it out. It was just all around bad. And that's not the top of where they could be playing. They could be playing a lot better. And if we get that Rice team, Marshall happened. Like Texas could happen. And it's going to be interesting. And it's going to come down to the offensive line. It's going to come down to execution. And it's going to come down to how Rice is able to match up with Texas. Because it's, like we talked about with Bloomgren when we were going through the Arkansas game. There's a lot of big uglies on the other side of the ball. So I guess we'll start with Rice offense and the Texas defense. So obviously, I think the big question here is, as always, running the football. Rice, before that fourth quarter final drive in garbage time with Rice trailing by 4 touchdowns against Houston, they were averaging 2.2 yards per carry. That's actually exactly what they averaged against Arkansas. So that's kind of been the baseline for Rice in competitive moments so far this year. Not to compare directly Arkansas-Texas, but Arkansas did run for 7.1 yards per carry against Texas. So where does Rice fit into that mix, and kind of walk me through what's the formula for getting Kalen Griffin and Jordan Myers, and I haven't really seen Juma Taviano, any of those guys into space and get those chunk plays. How doable is that?
Well, I think it has to do with playing with an early lead, and Texas folks might scoff at that when I say that, but that you run the ball when you have the lead, but you also have to involve the tight ends and get some receiving option. Coach was not going to make an excuse whatsoever, but not having Rosner, not having Pete last week, man, that was a kick in the pants, like that my words, not his. That
especially when you have 2 drops on the first 2 drives by receivers not named Rosner and Pete.
Exactly. And you're thinking, okay, they're going to have that, and you want to get some more action from. You want to see what Patterson can do. You want to see what Bailey can do. This is not an excuse-making business. That is a quote from Coach Bloomgren. So there's got to be some threat. They can't keep loading the extra guy or two in the box, and that makes an even struggling running game even more tough to run with. So you have to have some big play to maybe stretch it early and then alleviate a little pressure out of the box, but also find a way to soften it up with the tight ends. And it comes down to the O-line play in the end. That wasn't working against Houston that you just referenced that did make that improvement in the not even the last calendar year before that big win at Marshall, getting some kind of boost in there. Like whatever's happened, I don't pretend to be the X's and O's guys. I leave that to Nate. But they have not found those alleyways. And this goes back to Middle Tennessee last year. They haven't had that consistent, dominant run game like we know that is there with the talent. They haven't been able to get that going. So they've got to get the big passes to open things up. But also, I mean, you've got to use the tight ends a little more. And then to soften things up, you've got to be consistent with it. It's tough running when you're getting 2.2 a pop. It's tough to keep at that mindset. But at the same time, you've got to make them pay to open that up. It sounds like a confluence of a lot of opinions that are differing, but that all works symmetrically together, where you've got to have that cohesion line up. That's why it's not an easy thing to do. And then you get 175, you get 200 in a game. That's when you're hopefully getting out of Austin with the W on, I mean, even more than that. But if you are averaging up to 5-6 yards per carry, then a lot of things have gone right for you.
Right, and it's going to be particularly difficult because, everybody with the COVID redshirt year, everybody that is on both sides of the ball is pretty deep, and a lot of the starting rotation, whereas might be throwing some younger guys in there by necessity. This year, it's not the case. Rice is going up against a lot of teams that are still junior, senior laden because everybody's back. Except for, Alabama sending guys off to the NFL, but everybody else is more or less back. Keandre Coburn is a name I have circled. Big nose tackle for Texas that just kind of eats things up in the middle and can make plays. And I'm interested there because you and I both watched Rice play Houston a couple years back, and Ed Oliver was on the field. And I think that's probably... I'm not saying Keandre Coburn is Ed Oliver, but he's pretty darn good. And we saw Rice game plan and execute, I thought, really, really well for a powerful presence on the interior of the line at that point. Now, some different faces that are going to be suiting up on the Rice O-line, different, defensive front they're going to be facing. But I kind of have that nugget tucked in the back of my head because Rice has shown the ability to kind of game plan out one disruptive force. And if they can do that, maybe there's a better chance that they're going to be able to get some push up front. And, if it comes to running the other way, I'm okay running the other way to wherever Keandre Coburn is not lined up.
Yeah, I don't think Coburn is the same as Oliver. Like Oliver, different beast. He was a great pass rushing guy from the interior. Like it's the rare commodity. You don't see that. Like Aaron Donald, you don't see that. I think Coburn has a little bit of that, but he's mainly a big space eater, and he can do a lot of great things that guys that we don't see at the group of five level or we'll see this season at all. So it is tough to, like, people say, oh, just game plan around it. Yeah, you can do that, but that leaves other guys to fill in that void too. They've got Thornton, kind of their hand-down linebacker at times, LSU transfer, Ajomo. He's a KD kid. He's on the interior, but they're pretty deep too. They I remember the Huntsville kid Sweat when he was coming out of high school. They're not lacking for depth in that defensive line, but at the same time, this is a huge test for Rice to be able to kind of, okay, we're going to get out of here. We're going to play mad, like Shea Baker said in yesterday's presser. I like that. Like, Shea's really a soft-spoken guy, but you've got to be brutal. You've got to be angry at that point of attack. And if they can do that, and, hey, see my long answer in that last topic we were talking about, but opening up the running game, that that makes life so much better. Not to say easier, because nothing's ever easier on the field, but it opens things up so much, and then we can see a lot of those things we saw in the Arkansas game. Hopefully,
Yeah, and then we can keep going on this, but not to get too far ahead of ourselves. But the second level, it doesn't get any easier because you got Luke Brockmeyer, and DeMarvion Overshawn, which is one of the best linebackers probably in the Big 12 easily. If you can't block the line, then you're going to get eaten up, and we're going to be grateful to be talking about 2.2 yards per carry. So it starts with being fundamentally sound up front and getting a hat on a hat and opening up holes, because Kalen Griffin and Jordan Myers, they can run over a guy, but they can't run over four. Mm-hmm. Not to my knowledge. That seems a bit trickier.
Yeah, and they've got to have those pathways. And when you have those one-on-one matchups in space, who wins those, that'll obviously be a factor determining who can get the good running game going. But you mentioned Overshawn, ARP kid, East Texas kid. They have a very talented secondary as well too. Jaron Thompson, Lufkin kid, he is good. But Jamison, who is as impactful on the special teams or more, we saw that long return he had for a touchdown in that last game down the road at NRG. I mean, they've got bodies and bodies, and they've got stars and track stars, like Coach Bloomgren was saying this week. So not going to be easy, but hey, I think we said a few minutes ago, it's not supposed to be easy.
Yeah, and then I think close out there, the secondary, this is what I'm interested about, because this is a team that has been okay, been pretty good. I don't know if they've quite lived up to the talent, that they have in the secondary. They've had over the past couple years, man, some safeties that go on and have NFL talent. But for whatever reason, they've had a chink here and there where big plays have been available. That's something that we haven't, other than the 44-yard pass from Green to Pete in the Arkansas game, which, they're a common opponent again, we didn't really see much of that downfield stuff. So I'm not going to say Texas is susceptible, but if you got everybody focused in on stopping the run, I think there's a formula there where Rice might be able to get a chunk play or two, especially if you are, straining that defense with Luke McCaffrey. Once we saw it on the touchdown pass, he got out into space, and the linebacker had to make a decision of how was he going to let Rice attempt to score. And I think that's kind of what we need again. Yeah, that shovel pass again. He had a couple of those.
Yeah, and that goes back to when things break down, you saw who he was comfortable with. Not saying Luke is not comfortable with the other guys, but referencing that second quarter scoring drive, it was beautiful because the way it came about. He went to the 3 underhand tosses, and he found Jordan Myers, who is the old crusty vet on the team. So if Patterson can step up, can get something deep, or if Knight can do something, that'd be great. Jake Bailey, obviously, he has that potential. We saw that late last season. So, again, it goes back to testing those guys. You go after them. You don't just play into their hands. That's what they want you to do. You go after them. And I'm anxious to see when and if that comes and what stage of the game that comes, because that will dictate early part of that ball game.
Yeah, absolutely. Find that space in the middle of the field and take advantage of it. I think that's easy enough for us to say, right? Sitting here in front of our screens. So that's one piece, and then the second piece is probably going to be equally as daunting for Rice. Not to say that they can't do it, but it's going to be challenging, and that is how do you stop Bijan Robinson? Because you're talking about a guy that most people have circled as one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the country, and slowing him down is going to be crucial when it comes to slowing the Texas offense down. He was held to only 70 yards against Arkansas, and that was enough for Arkansas to kind of slow the Texas offense down. But how does Rice, and we know that they've got a couple of guys banged up on the front 7. We don't really know the status of all of them yet. But how do you prevent Bijan Robinson from beating you? And is it that easy? Can you just say we don't let Bijan Robinson beat us, we'll let somebody else beat us, and roll your dice and go from there?
It's an idea. Work with me, okay? You convince him the game's at 8:30 or like 9 o'clock.
Ah, okay, okay.
We got enough influential Rice folks out now. It's tough. He's see, I'm working with a lot of different levels there. He is really really good. They kept him in the garage a lot, and that was one of the huge criticisms of Tom Herman. But so far, they're freeing Bijan here, and he's looking good. And with even that, what seemed to be his standard low last week against Arkansas, it's not always the long run, it's when it comes. And when you have dudes like that, okay, let's say it's 13-10 Texas lead and Robinson rips off a 77-yarder. Okay, that's pretty crushing, We were talking about those 10 and 17-point deficits earlier. But if you're Rice isn't this explosive type of offensive team yet. They're going to have to win a low-scoring ball game. But if you can limit his runs, like you always hear in basketball, they're going to get theirs, but you don't want them to just explode and decimate you for play after play after play. I can't explain the X's and O's behind it, but I can tell you that if you make him work for those yards, and if he can have 20 carries in the 77 yards instead of 9 carries and 93 yards, and that the clock be winding down, that's a successful night against him. But yeah, he's a playmaker in space. You need a lot of that goldfish mentality, and hopefully they have a great plan for him. But when I come back, and I was on the Orange Bloods on their show yesterday, talking to them. I'm so confident in what Brian Smith can do. There's never been, I say never, no absolutes here. There haven't been any times that I can remember, I was like, what are they doing defensively here? The Houston game was rough, but they just didn't get on the line. That was a rough game for the defensive line.
But it was clear that they had a plan.
Yeah.
It might not have worked, but at no point did it feel like this team was lost. I agree.
He's the wizard. And Coach Bloomgren told me about him last week, saying they call him the wizard around there because he comes up with so much great stuff. And like we all know, these are Rice guys. You can throw a lot at them in a short amount of time. It retains, and they can be able to do it. Unfortunately now, like you and I talked about in the preseason, they've got a lot more depth. They're a lot bigger. Now you've got to test that depth a little bit more. We don't know Schumann's status. We don't know Trayshawn Chamberlain's status. That him going out Saturday against the Cougars looked a lot worse, if it was possible, than he did against Arkansas when he got taken off on the cart. Later he told me, I'm good, coach. I drink my milk. They called him the milkman around South Carolina where he grew up. So it goes back to that. We were talking about injuries in the wide receiving corps. You don't make any excuses. It's next man up, and hopefully hold them to as few big plays as possible. Yeah, like the guy said this week, they're going to get their big plays, but you minimize those and you hit them in the mouth, make them like it, and get it to that close game in the fourth quarter. Like I know they're confident that they can do.
And I think what's particularly going to be interesting is just like Rice has done, I guess, since the Arkansas game, Texas is making a quarterback change. And it's going to be Casey Thompson starting for, he's come in relief, it feels like 100 times over the past couple of years. But making a start, I guess we might see Hudson Card. He's more the pocket guy. But Casey Thompson, I want to talk about a little bit as we close out, is a kind of a mobile guy and can run and really adds a dimension to this offense in much the same way that Luke McCaffrey does. And so, I think having 2 rushing threats in the backfield is going to be interesting. And it's something that I think, for the most part, if we look back, we talk about the wizard of Brian Smith. If I kind of go through my Rolodex of mobile quarterbacks that Rice has faced, you had what was it, an 82-yard run by Jason Bean in the North Texas game. But that's really the only moment I can think of, and that was just some guy tripped and didn't make a play. But for the most part, this has been a defense that's handled mobile quarterbacks pretty well. Do you think the Texas offense morphs too much, or maybe not too much, morphs to a great degree from what they were against Arkansas with a different guy under the center? Or is it going to kind of be the same look and feel?
One, I have zero idea. Okay, I have no idea. Well, you got me on the show, right? I have no idea in that. What I can tell you, I think, is that Thompson, he's very efficient in the red zone, and that scares me. It's one thing that, I mean, he gets him down there with, I mean, a lot of that was in that bowl game too, because he had that most extended run, but this is a guy who hasn't dealt with the starting role yet at Texas. But one note, the 5 drives he's led this season, they've scored 4 times, and just one of the field goal from maybe the best kicker in the country. But a note they have, he came in the second half of that Alamo Bowl for Sam Ehlinger. Remember, he got dinged up a bit, but he's guided 10 Texas drives. So still relatively, he's short on film, but you know the dynamic he's going to be. Obviously comes in great bloodlines with his dad, being a great OU quarterback. But Longhorn scored on 9 of those 10 drives, so he's very efficient. And you can't have those 7s stay 7s. You got to keep them at 3s. I know that great math there. People like, hey, on defense, 3s are better than 7s. So you almost would rather see Dicker line up for 4 or 5 field goals rather than Thompson have 3 of those be touchdowns, because that ends up getting you more points scored against you. But, yeah, Thompson, he's really good. He's waited for his time. He's been patient. I was reading some articles about him yesterday and how he entered the portal, quickly came out a while back, but this time he didn't even consider it. He just had to be patient and wait for his time. I just hope it's not one of those he's chomping at the bit and you happen to be the next team on the schedule and then he shows out and wins the job in that game. No, don't win the job in this game. Let Rice make it rough on him, and we'll see how it unfolds from there. But I'm confident, like we said a minute or so ago, what Brian Smith can do to try to confuse a quarterback like that. And I was almost going to say a young quarterback, but he's really not that
anymore. Yeah,
he's been in the system forever, and he's been waiting for his time. So in that respect, that worries me a little bit, that he's really going to be gung-ho and chomping at the bit, waiting for this chance.
Yeah, and I guess there's some, been in the system, that the system's changed up a little bit over this year with, I guess he now has 2 games worth of time in the system. And I guess that's kind of where we close things up here, because I think it's interesting. We haven't talked too much about Steve Sarkisian and him coming to Texas. I think there was a lot of emphasis placed on, for them, the Louisiana game out of the gate, because that's a really good football team. And, probably could have gone in and beat Texas, and nobody who pays attention to college football would have been too shocked. But if you're Texas, you don't want the look of losing to Louisiana. So they passed that test, and then they ran into Arkansas and got buzzsawed. So I think it's interesting. We have Mike Bloomgren here are we year 4 now? Am I doing my math right? Yeah. Mike Bloomgren in year 4, kind of at the point where you've rebuilt and reloaded. It's time to go out and produce. And then you have Steve Sarkisian, who is right out of the blocks with, maybe not as much leeway. It's go win now. The coaching dynamics here, especially with some crossover between Bloomgren and Sarkisian, do you think that's going to just add one more wrinkle of intrigue?
Oh, it has to. I mean, guys like us, we're always looking for different things to kind of pull that yarn out and see. And I sounded like a doofus when I asked Coach the other night, hey, you ever run across Sark? And yeah, of course, when he had his time, when he was at USC, Coach Bloomgren was at with Stanford for a while. So it's a great variable. I see Coach Sarkisian as a guy that is expected to win now and win yesterday. They're not giving him any slack whatsoever. Obviously, the rebuild's a little more patient with Coach Bloomgren as he was rebuilding things, but can't wait for Saturday night. Can I show you? Are you done? Can I show you my new look? I'm thinking about debuting in the booth.
Yeah. Who wants to listen to me talk? What do we got? That's what I want to ask you about next. What's up for Saturday? Oh.
First off, we're friends.
This is good.
Again, we're going to Tech. I'm breaking out we're going to Austin. I love my Texas, not the college, the state. So what are we thinking? Like, it's hard to get
Oh,
full.
slam dunk. Absolutely.
So,
You don't need to reserve that for Texas. We can have that every
yeah,
week.
that's what I'm thinking. I think
I need to get me one, man.
yeah, I got this in Fredericksburg. I think this was right after things settled down a little bit, that first wave of Rona. And it's like, yeah, I have such a big, massive noggin. It was hard to find a good hat. And so, yeah, other members of my party, the woman that co-owns the house I live with, the wife, says it makes me look like a safari guy, but I don't know. It's
No,
not
I'm
cowboy.
in.
I don't know. So
Hey, if your wife's not going to be in the radio booth with you, I think you're good.
there you go.
Take it off before you walk through the door at home, right?
Yeah, she'll never know.
Oh man. Well, on that note, I do want to, because we talked about this at some point when we conversed. Tell everybody about the live look-in, the radio show, the in-game bits, because I think that's something, especially for road games, that Rice fans will enjoy.
Yeah, Nate and I do a pre-game show, so to speak. He'll be on the field, I'll be in the booth, or the other way around, and we just kind of get the flavor, get the atmosphere. I'm always tense and squeamish because Nate will just go up to Hans Straub and just start to, like, leave them alone. Like, this is game day. But Nate, as you know, there's no telling Nate what to do.
He's a people person.
He is the best people person of people. What? And then that's on the internet. And then we have this website called YouTube and Facebook. They're doing okay for themselves. We do the live look-in where we kind of talk shop and we call the game. That's what we do. And then people can see in the booth. But
yeah, there you go.
At this time.
Go check out JP on the internet.
Everywhere on the internet.
The links are there. Yeah, thank y'all for tuning in. We will, as always, you can go grab a copy, get subscribed on the Patreon. We'll get practice updates. We mentioned injuries and stuff. We're going to be keeping close eye on practice later today and tomorrow, who is there and who's coming to Texas. Go give a listen and watch JP and Nate chop it up pregame. You don't have any shortage of Rice coverage, so we're here for you guys. But until then, we'll be back next week talking Texas Southern and another intra-Houston matchup, which will be fun. But until then, y'all take care and Rice fight.
Never dies.